Yo, you, yeah, you, yes, you right there watching. If you don't like the video, we throwing hands. Simple. We just gonna throw hands. Like we like meet outside in the backyard and throw hands. Like the video. What's up, YouTube? It's your boy J Peasy on the Keezy, and it's too freaking easy to be back with another video today. Man, I'm excited, man, because we gonna start a new process, man. I'm definitely getting way more creative with these videos, man. You're really about to unleash my editing prowess on this. But today's video comes from an email. Like, the dude hit me on my business email. You know how they say, for business inquiries, this email, or hit my manager. But yeah, this is the email. This, I don't know why I'm pointing down here like I got the whole screen, but it should be like over here or whatever direction, somewhere in the bottom of the screen. That is my like YouTube business email. So if you want to hit me with like a reaction request, if you want to guarantee that I see all the comments, but they get buried. But if you want to guarantee I see your reaction request, then you hit my email. If you're like an upcoming business and you want me to promote your products, I definitely can add my sauce to it. You know what I'm saying? Hit that email. You know what I'm saying? For any type of questions, hit that email. I have a Discord, even though like the Discord is like mad inactive. Maybe if you want to hop in the Discord, chop it up with me personally. You know what I'm saying? Because I would definitely be in there if I had a lit Discord. We'd be lit in that Discord. Definitely would do like giveaways, like live streams, stuff like that. Like cool stuff just to be lit with y'all, as we continue this grind towards 100K. You know what I'm saying? That's my next goal. We hit 10K. Now we got to hit 100K. We're starting today on the Cuban Missile Crisis. So my broad understanding of the missile crisis is, hey, there's this guy in Cuba, Fidel Castro. He's like bad. He's a dictator. And he hates the United States. And you know what? Cuba has missiles aimed directly at the United States. Seeing how close in proximity Cuba is to the United States, that's a big problem. So, it's a whole ordeal trying to de-escalate the situation. That is my very, 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 very broad synopsis in my head. Obviously, I haven't gone in depth. Well, shout out to Time Ghost History. You know what I'm saying? We're on his channel. I will leave the link to the video in the description, so you can go and check out his videos for yourself. So we're just gonna do this, man. We just gonna. This is like a 9-part series. We're gonna do all the parts, man. I'm gonna see how y'all like it, man. Let me know. Leave a like if you ain't seen the video in the beginning. Leave a like, or we're scrapping. Like, we're gonna have to meet outside. If you don't like this video, we're gonna meet outside. And you're not subscribed either. I don't know what you on, man. You wilding right now. If you're not subscribed, you're wilding. I got almost 1,000 videos on this channel. There should be something on here that you like, at least. You know what I'm saying? If not, let me know. Email me. You know what I'm saying? But let's get this. USA starts the atomic arms race. The Cuban Missile Crisis, Prelude 1. Let's get it, man. Without further ado, let's just hop into this.
October 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis brings the world one launch code away from full-on nuclear war between the Soviet Union and the United States. This documentary series will cover that crisis one day at a time. But first, we're releasing 2 preludes to the crisis to set the stage. Here comes part 1.
You know what? I might do both preludes in this video, no cap. Just to give y'all just some extra spiciness.
This is Time Ghost, the Cuban Missile Crisis. I'm Indy Nidell. Never before, and never since, has that possibility of our world being suddenly destroyed been so close. In the 58 years since it happened, the Cuban Missile Crisis and its aftermath has been analyzed in books, dissertations, fictional films, and documentaries. But as more of the actual source documents have been made public over the past 25 years, the story looks significantly different from both sides' original official versions. To understand the crisis, we first have to look at where the 2 superpowers stand in 1962. The capitalist and communist systems have been in opposition from the day the Bolsheviks seized power in Russia after the 1917 revolutions.
Yep.
The Soviets see the capitalist system as a scourge of humanity that needs to be eliminated. On the American side, the communist system is seen as a direct threat to the American way of life.
We believe in freedom. Freedom for these people, for ourselves, for everyone. We want freedom, not tyranny.
The persecution of communists in the States during the Cold War and McCarthyism are well known. But this started already in the 1920s with the Red Scare, when thousands of American communists were prosecuted and incarcerated and even exiled for their political beliefs. The hatchet was briefly buried when the two became allies against Germany in the Second World War. But it was dug up as that war ended, and in 1962, it is unclear which ideology will prevail.
It is total competition with an antagonist who is putting into it everything within his capability. It is not a conflict between peoples, but between basic values and systems of government.
Western world, led by the US, is establishing a system of more or less free trade and alliances based on independence, inclusion, and personal freedoms. The goal is peace and prosperity.
I'm John Wayne. Is there any better or equal hope in the world, Lincoln asked, than the ultimate justice of the people? We Americans believe there is not. The stonework of our national life is made of this belief. We believe in many things, but this belief that man is a responsible being bears out our own unique stamp as a nation. As a people, we are active and often noisy. We are industrious, oftentimes to the bafflement of ourselves and our friends.
The communist...
That was back when they were allowed to smoke cigarettes on like TV. Now you can't even. I think if you smoke cigarettes in a movie, it's like it's almost has to be like a PG-13 or like an R-rated movie now. That's crazy how society has kind of conditioned because I remember back in the day, society was like, "Ayo, even though there was a Surgeon General warning on the box, cigarettes are healthy."
World, led by the Soviet Union, though initially in cooperation with China, is developing a system of planned economy and regulated trade that depends on expanding the communist system to client states under Soviet or Chinese control. The goal is peace and prosperity.
We must create a whole new generation of mechanics, Stalin said. In 1928, the first of a series of large-scale 5-year plans was begun. And by 1940, Russia was far different from the land of the czars.
As World War II ended, many of the Central and Eastern European countries that had been invaded by Germany and then liberated by the Red Army fell under Soviet control. The Soviets also kept control of East Germany when Germany was split into East and West. But this was only the beginning of Soviet expansion. Under communist doctrine, the Soviet Union theoretically strives for a world without borders, controlled by the dictatorship of the proletariat. To achieve this, it seeds and supports communist revolutions wherever possible. This is a direct threat to the democratic principles of much of the Western world. So the US began a policy of global containment, supporting and financing anti-communist movements in Europe, in former European, African, and Asian colonies, and in Latin America. This is an expansion of the Monroe Doctrine from the 1800s, named after President James Monroe, which says that any European colonialism in the Americas will be actively opposed by the United States. The American continents, by the free and independent condition which they have assumed and maintain, are henceforth not to be considered as subjects for future colonization by any European powers. We could not view any interposition for the purpose of oppressing them or controlling in any other manner their destiny by any European power in any other light than as the manifestation of an unfriendly disposition towards the United States. The U.S. has started to apply the spirit of the Monroe Doctrine to the entire world, though its direct application within the Americas will prove critical to the events leading up to the Cuban Missile Crisis and the crisis itself. This web of principles and theories brings the two superpowers into direct conflict all over the world and provides the basis on which the Cold War will be fought. It leads to a long series of proxy wars, covert operations of influence, and the fanning of regional conflicts to further the interests of each side. In early 1948, the first major confrontations arise when the democracy in Czechoslovakia is overthrown in a Soviet-backed communist coup.
Oh, just hold on. This is wild how the Cold War lasted literally for almost 50 years, and the amount of just like time periods and eras that the Cold War, you gotta think about the 60s, like the 40s and 50s, where it was, everybody was doing like factory work, and it was like the American industry is like booming, like extremely booming, because now stuff is made affordable, and now everybody has easy access to automobiles, because when they first came out, automobiles were very expensive for people and they couldn't afford them. Now they're being made cheaply, and people can afford automobiles. People can afford like quality homes. Like people are establishing their place in life. Like in the 40s and 50s, like this is like a period of like economic growth in the United States. And then, I mean, obviously after the war, but like we're talking about then the 60s. Then you got JFK. Then you got civil rights, like extreme social justice, like the hippies come out of nowhere, like the hippies, the Beatles, just pop culture becomes a huge like emphasis in America, like just pop culture and just stuff that is not related to like economics, like music and sports and global and like current events. And then you got like the Vietnam War, you know, the war that America probably shouldn't have went in, and we paid dearly for that. But you know, during this time, it's a very like prosperous time in the United States, because we're booming, especially after World War II ends, and then we establish ourselves as a superpower because, bro, we just nuked Japan twice. So it's like, oh, hold on, let me chill. United States is, hey, you know what I'm saying? We basically just showed the world, like we just bullied the whole world at that point. So we're already establishing ourselves as a global superpower to this point. So yeah, this is definitely a boom period during the United States, though.
And the Western Allies introduced the new Deutschmark as the currency in Berlin. Berlin at the time is divided into 4 zones of military control between France, Great Britain, the US, and the Soviets. But the city is still governed as one unit by local powers, right? The introduction of a new currency is a direct threat to Soviet economic control over the city. Up to then, President Harry Truman and the US had not decided what to do with Berlin. They weren't even sure if they would keep armed forces within the city. Soviet leader Joseph Stalin, though, had decided his gang would keep control over all of East Germany, including Berlin, and milk it for as many resources as possible. They had, in fact, managed to turn their zone's population against them by plundering industrial resources, forcibly deporting workers, and even transporting whole factories to Russian territory. France and Great Britain, for their part, are staunchly opposed to a Soviet Berlin and pressure the US to hold out against the Russians, and officially, everyone is striving for a reunited Germany with Berlin as its capital. In an attempt to stop the Deutschmark, Stalin orders a full blockade of the city so that no food, materials, or supplies can be brought in. The Allies respond by creating an air bridge into the city, flying in enough food and materials to keep the city alive. The Berlin airlift eventually brings in so many supplies that Stalin gives up, and the blockade is practically over by May 1949, though officially it's lifted in September. But both sides move to assert their control over Germany. First, the Federal Republic of Germany is created as a democratic state on May 5th, 1949. Then, on October 7th, the SED, the East German Communist Party, proclaims the German Democratic Republic, which, despite its name, is a satellite state to the Soviet Union. With all of this, the threat that the Soviet Union is to the West is now tangible and immediate. It brings the Western Allies closer together, and they create the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, as a bulwark against Soviet expansion. A similar situation to Germany also exists in Korea. After being liberated from Japan during World War II, Korea has been split into the north under Soviet control and the South under U.S. control, both claiming sovereignty over each other's territory. The attempt to create two independent states fails in 1950 when the North invades the South and the Korean War breaks out. While the Soviets and Chinese back the North, a large part of the rest of the world unites in defense of the South in a combined intervention under the United Nations flag. Ostensibly, the war is between an independent North and a UN-backed South. In reality, China and the Soviet Union give extensive support to the North, and 88% of the UN forces for the South are from the United States. The war even actually sees direct battle between Russians and Americans as Soviet airmen fight their US Air Force counterparts in the Korean skies. 3 years of bloody war end with a divided Korea along the line of the DMZ, not too different from the Strait Division along the 38th parallel, where they began in 1950. Meanwhile, in Europe, the conflict around West and East Germany continues to escalate. In 1952, the Soviet Union proposes the reunification of Germany as a free democratic state on the condition that the new Germany would remain neutral and not be allowed to join NATO. West Germany refuses, fearing that the Soviets will not stick to their promises of allowing the new country independence. To what extent?
Fight. I mean, that's smart. That's kind of smart. That makes a lot of sense because if they literally tried to block your country and tried to keep you from getting food and supplies, then that doesn't make a very convincing, a partner. Yeah, let's go with the people that blockaded our whole city, and we had to get the U.S. and all the other NATO-related countries to come in and come in and remove the blockade. We weren't getting any water, no food, no supplies, no electricity, nothing.
Extent the proposal actually comes from the Soviets, or is a real East German initiative, and if so, a missed opportunity for genuine reunification, is still an issue of debate. After Stalin's death in 1953, the Soviet Union proposes that it too should join NATO to preserve peace in Europe. The US and Britain reject this, seeing it as an attempt to stop the buildup of NATO forces in Europe. Instead, they move to include West Germany in NATO. The Soviet reaction is to form the Warsaw Pact in 1955. This effectively joins the Soviet Union and 7 Central and Eastern European satellite states into a single cohesive military force. On paper, the two blocs are now in a balance of power state, but only if you don't consider the nuclear arms race. The Soviets had already begun developing nuclear arms during World War II, but it would take until 1949 for them to develop a functional atom bomb to test. The US is well aware of Soviet efforts, and in response, increases its nuclear program from an estimated 13 warheads in 1947 to 2,422 by 1955. In the same time frame, the Soviets are able to increase their arsenal to 200. The US is clearly ahead.
Wait. I can't go. Let's do some math. Hold on. Let's do some math. They said in 1947 they had 13 warheads, and in 1955 they had 2,422. So we just going to divide that by 8. Hold on. 2,422 divided by 8. Divided by 8. Let's do it by 8. 300 warheads a year. 302.75. 300 warheads a year, bro. And most of them are still buried underneath the earth. Right underneath the ground right now. So that's kind of scary.
By the time John F. Kennedy is inaugurated as president in 1961, the U.S. has an estimated 22,229 operational warheads, while the Soviets possess just 2,492. Furthermore, the deployment systems of the U.S. are so much more advanced that the Soviets have no realistic chance of launching a first strike that would lead to anything other than immediate self-destruction. JFK knows this. The by now sole leader of the Soviet Union, Nikita Khrushchev, knows this. The military commanders on both sides know this. The KGB knows this. The CIA knows this. But the American and Soviet public do not know this. And this will prove crucial in the crisis to come. Meanwhile, in Asia, Latin America, Africa, and Europe, the dance of revolutionary and counter-revolutionary actions goes on. 4 of these hotspots will become critical for Kennedy: Berlin, Vietnam, Laos, and Cuba. Okay, the developments in Southeast Asia in the 1950s lead to the Domino Theory, formulated by President Dwight Eisenhower in 1954. This theory states that if one country in a region is allowed to fall to communism, then the rest will swiftly follow. The Laotian Civil War is a proxy war that neither the Soviets nor the US are really keen on fighting, but still have to stay engaged in. That war breaks out in 1953, but will soon spill into the Vietnam War, which begins 2 years later, which in turn will partly reignite the Korean War. And it looks more and more like the Domino Theory is correct.
True.
So after New Year's 1959, when Fidel Castro rather unexpectedly succeeds with the Cuban Revolution, the US thinks it has all the reason in the world to fear a communist surge in its own backyard, and that it needs to be stopped as swiftly as possible. I should point out here that the Western powers under US leadership have more money than the Soviet Union, more resources, and outpower it in nuclear arms by a factor of 10. And yet, both sides are capable of destroying the world. And now, here we stand as the 1960s are about to begin, with them facing each other ever more warily over a world ever more divided in two, and that world will very soon be on the brink of nuclear holocaust. I mentioned Stalin's death, but if you want to see his rise to power, you can click here for our Between Two Wars episode about that.
See, I'm learning about that. Of course, like, why would you not worry about Cuba? It's literally right there. Oh, wow. We're trying to worry about stopping a communist revolution from all the way across the world. We got one right there, which is, I think Cuba's like less than 1,000 miles off the coast of Florida. It's like, that's ridiculous. So that's extremely close and well within the range of any nuclear missiles. You know what? We're going to watch part 2. We're going to watch the second prelude, so stay tuned. You know, hey, like the video. If you're still watching, like the video. You know what I'm saying? Like the video. I'm still keeping true on that promise. We still gonna throw hands if you don't like the video.
From the end of World War II until 1962, the Western world, led by the United States, and the communist world, led by the Soviet Union, are on a continuous path of collision as the Cold War explodes all over the world. The two sides face off in direct confrontation in Berlin and wage proxy conflicts in Czechoslovakia, Albania, Greece, Korea, Laos, Vietnam, and Cuba. And for 13 days in October 1962, the world comes closer to nuclear holocaust than ever before. This is Time Ghost, the Cuban Missile Crisis. I'm Indy Nidell. The Cuban Missile Crisis does not begin in Cuba. It has its roots in Berlin, Italy, and Turkey. The domestic political situation in the U.S., facing the newly elected President John F. Kennedy, and in the USSR, where Nikita Khrushchev takes power after a harsh 4-year struggle following Joseph Stalin's death in 1953. But leader of the Soviet Union is not a comfortable position in which to be. He faces an ailing economy, the solution for which the party believes is partly an increased sphere of global control and more client states. He faces demands for reform and liberalization at home, but also the expectation to carry out an aggressive foreign policy to protect Soviet interests. And an important part of that policy is the nuclear arms race, where the USSR is way behind the United States. From 1957 to 1962, the number of operational American nuclear warheads goes from around 5,500 to an estimated 25,540. Over that time, the Soviets go from 660 to 3,346. Enough explosive power to destroy planet Earth several times over, sure, but still not even close to an actual balance of power.
Yeah, that you gotta think. Khrushchev really is he's in a bind right here, because you gotta think. Like, Soviet Union, it's like you said before, the economy was not the best. You know what I'm saying? Because people were starving. Like, it was a lot of famine going on, and then you gotta think, we kind of have to fight with a global superpower while trying to restore our own country. and we're kind of way behind the 8 ball in terms of production because obviously we don't have the resources because our economy is nowhere near as strong as America's economy. So, I mean, it was a losing battle all along, but still, both of these countries still have enough to just turn the whole earth to smithereens. Like, just the fact that a country has 25,000 nuclear warheads. Just think about the amount of damage that does. Like, look how much 2 warheads did. 2 of them did in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Look at how much damage 2 did. Like, that's literally destroyed entire cities in seconds. Wiped out entire cities, buildings flattened, people vaporized in seconds. And you gotta think, it's still after effects from radiation, which can cause cancer, birth defects in children, learning disabilities in children, then you have to, like Chernobyl, you have to quarantine the whole area, so now nobody can go in there because the amount of radiation is so high that it will literally kill you upon exposure. Like, just think about the immense amount of weaponry that is being built. And it's just, people just threatening. It's just like a whole game of, hey, I'm gonna showcase my guns. Look at my guns. Well, no, look at my guns. You know what I'm saying? Like, look how many guns we got. We got more guns than you. We just, hey, finger on the trigger. I'm ready. I'm ready to shoot. Hey, you give me one reason.
After Kennedy's election, this situation will worsen for the Soviets. When President Eisenhower, Kennedy's predecessor, was still in office, the Cuban Revolution had ousted Fulgencio Batista and put Fidel Castro at the head of a now communist Cuba. Despite extensive U.S. support, a close ally of the U.S. has fallen to communism. And according to Eisenhower's Domino Theory, more Latin American states will follow suit. And with revolutionary movements brewing all over the South American continent, that seems a plausible assumption. At first, the U.S. administration chooses to observe and tolerate Castro until he confiscates and nationalizes all American assets on Cuban soil. The U.S. answers with an embargo on Cuban goods and the economic isolation of Cuba. So in February 1960, Cuba enters into an economic alliance with the USSR. 1 month later, Eisenhower orders the U.S. military to start training Cuban expats for an armed counter-revolution.
You know what's crazy? Didn't the embargo just get lifted like recently within the last 5 years? Like, I think the embargo got lifted. I think Obama lifted the embargo like almost right before he left office. So you gotta think this is 1960 to 2015-16. So almost 60 years the U.S. had an embargo on Cuba. Wow. That's cold.
Now, unlike the Soviet economy, the American economy has been growing vigorously, despite a brief recession in 57 and 58. The U.S. avoided the destruction that befell the countries in which the Second World War had actually been fought, and capitalized on a post-war global economy that desperately needed rebuilding. Despite this, though, there are deep divisions and challenges on the home front. There is the big fear that communism will spread throughout the world and destroy the American way of life, or even result in another world war.
What we oppose fundamentally is the aggressive nature of the communist state. Its unceasing effort to expand wherever it can, to grow bigger, to take over, to supplant. This deadly impulse toward aggression we oppose as a continual threat to peace.
Also, when the USSR puts the first satellite, Sputnik, into orbit in 1957, the American public wrongfully concludes that they have fallen behind the Soviets in technological development as well, and assumes that the Soviet Union has passed them in the nuclear arms race. There are racial and social injustices that split the electorate, and the young and ambitious senator from Massachusetts named John Fitzgerald Kennedy says he will take on all of these issues at once. He runs his presidential campaign in 1960 on a promise of change. He will reform the country to improve equality and liberty for all. He will boost the economy by promoting technological advancement and commerce. And above all, he will be aggressive with the Soviets and close that perceived missile gap.
The choice for you is clear. The choice is between those who sit still and look to the past and between those who look to the future. Between those who recognize that in this deadly age, when we are involved in a close and narrow competition for survival, for the maintenance of freedom around the globe, with our adversaries, the communists, the best that this country can do is none too good. And therefore, I come here today and ask your help in moving this country forward again.
Okay,
Now,
JFK, talk your stuff. Talk your stuff. He said those who sit still and then those who look at the... that quotables.
Until the late 1950s, the prime deployment method for nuclear weapons was bombs carried on planes. Rocket development, though, is creating a new way to deploy them much further away and with less risk of being prevented or intercepted. Intercontinental ballistic missiles, or ICBMs, can travel the globe in just dozens of minutes. Both the Soviet Union and the US work feverishly to develop functioning ICBM programs, and on both sides, it's proving to be a real challenge. In 1958, the Gayton Report is issued by the US Air Force, which assumes that Russian ICBM deployment has reached at least 130 units and will increase to close to 1,500 by 1963. At the same time, an independent CIA report concludes that the USSR has about 10 deployable ICBMs. In reality, the Soviets have 4, of which 2 are untested prototypes, while the US has a couple dozen. By 1962, the United States has 177 ICBMs, the Soviet Union still has fewer than 40. The Eisenhower administration is well aware that the Gayton Report is erroneous and even suspects that the CIA report is an overestimation. But political opponents of that administration leak the report, and it's seized upon by Kennedy in his presidential campaign. So Kennedy hits the campaign trail promising to close the missile gap created by the Eisenhower administration's inaction in the arms race. Despite being repeatedly informed about the actual situation, Kennedy continues this rhetoric. Finally, in July 1960, Eisenhower summons both Kennedy and his running mate Lyndon Johnson to the White House and informs them personally of the actual situation. It is to no avail. For back on the campaign trail, Kennedy continues to slam Eisenhower for allowing the missile gap to arise. He even goes so far as to claim that he himself discovered the gap and coined the phrase.
What did Eisenhower think? If that's my political opponent, and people are already under me thinking that I know that there's a secret missile gap and the United States is behind in missiles, that's a rallying point for the people. Come on, like why would I be? Oh, you know what I said before. Like, what? So he gonna come for the people like, ladies and gentlemen of America, what I said about the missile gap was a lie. We are actually way ahead of the Soviet Union. So don't even disregard what I said about the missile gap, and have a good day, America. Like, he would not have been president at that point. You got to do what you got to do to win at that point. Like, I don't care if you tell me we have 37,000, they got 1. I'm still going to go with what I did because I'm trying to get in the presidency.
Kennedy's opponent, Richard Nixon, attacks Kennedy as being weak on fighting communism and too young to shoulder the challenges of the Cold War.
We know the right way, and our opponent offered a way which would have lost us our friends in Latin America, the tremendous outrage that they exploded with once he made that very silly and foolish and immature suggestion of his that we ought to intervene directly in Cuba. Now, of course, he's jumped off of it. But let me just say one thing with regard to that. Can America, in this time, afford a well-intentioned man, but a man who, frankly, doesn't know the situation and who says one thing today and another thing tomorrow? That kind of a man, Mr. Khrushchev will make mincemeat of. That's what I'm talking about.
This ages very well, Mr. Nixon. in just a few short years, you are exposed, sir. I gotta look into Watergate though. I definitely have to look into Watergate because I want to get the dirt on the whole situation. Definitely.
Kennedy counters by upping the anti-communist rhetoric and continuing his claims about the non-existent missile gap. As the election approaches, the candidates are neck and neck. Kennedy barely ekes out the win with a margin of the popular vote of 0.17%, carrying 4 fewer states than Nixon, but winning 303 votes of the Electoral College. Allegations of voter fraud and irregularities follow.
Voter fraud? That sounds familiar. That sounds familiar. Hashtag stop the count. Let me stop.
And the bitter, close campaign leaves Kennedy with a less than optimal amount of popular support. We now know that Kennedy and his brother, soon-to-be Attorney General Robert Kennedy, believed in a dialogue with the Soviets, but harsh measures against Cuba. And even before Kennedy took office, they opened a direct back-channel communication line to the Soviet Union through the spy Georgy Bolshakov, a highly positioned Russian intelligence operative with direct access to Khrushchev. Now, this contact was reported to the FBI and CIA and was never covert. But as the situation between the superpowers deteriorates, it soon becomes a vital part of the regular intelligence and diplomatic operations of the Kennedy administration. And Kennedy has made public promises that he now needs to keep. One of his early actions as president will be to continue the planned covert invasion of Cuba already put in motion by Eisenhower. In April 1961, 3 months after taking office, he orders the invasion that will soon be known as the Bay of Pigs invasion. On April 17th, close to 1,500 CIA-trained Cuban exiles descend on Cuba's Bay of Pigs, supported by 8 B-26 bombers and 5 supply ships. Facing them are 25,000 soldiers, 200,000 militia, and 9,000 police. And it does not take long before the invasion becomes a fiasco, and a very public fiasco. The reaction and condemnation by Cuba and the Soviet Union are swift and angry. And in the following months, Bobby Kennedy will meet Bolshakov a total of 19 times in order to try to patch up relations, to little avail.
Damn, JFK. Damn, JFK. Damn. That Bay of Pigs invasion was a flop. That was one of the worst things that could have happened. Because you got to think, the tension's already high. He's already saying he's going to go ahead. He's going to eliminate Cuba as a communist. He's going to eliminate everything. And then you go and invade Cuba just on your own volition. And then you get spanked by Cuba. Some a minuscule country compared to the United States, not just in size, in terms of like worldwide influence. And everybody's like, whose man's is this? You know what I'm saying? What is he trying to do? Like, why would he just randomly, he tried to attack Cuba and then he fails. So that looks like it's a huge stain on his record.
The Kennedy administration continues to look for ways to overthrow or undermine the Castro government, though. But despite the situation in Cuba, a summit between Kennedy and Khrushchev goes ahead in June. The main topic on the agenda is Berlin, and both parties walk away satisfied that they have prevailed, while in actual fact they have achieved nothing. Days later, Kennedy announces an increase in the U.S. armed forces by over 20% to protect the world from the USSR. He also specifically increases the troops deployed to Berlin. Khrushchev, who is on vacation on the Black Sea at the time, is reportedly furious, but that is only the beginning of his problems. That same month, the U.S. starts deploying mid-range ballistic missiles in Italy. In contrast to ICBMs, MRBMs do exist in large amounts. These missiles now allow the U.S. to strike at the Russian heartland within minutes of an outbreak of war. More MRBMs are positioned in NATO ally Turkey, even closer to Russia. Kennedy is delivering on his promise to close that imaginary missile gap. But to do this quickly, he and his Secretary of Defense, Robert McNamara, must rely on existing and tested missile technology. And the only missiles that exist in large enough amounts are the PGM-19 Jupiter missiles. Developed in 1954 and produced from 1956, these are already dated by 1961, but more importantly, they stand above the ground, so they can easily be spotted and destroyed by airstrikes. So they're fairly useless as defensive weapons and only really good for a first strike. It does not take long for the USSR to find out what's going on, and Khrushchev's frustration and fury continue to grow. The next challenge comes when East Germany closes the border between East and West Berlin to the passage of civilians in order to stop the brain bleed of East German academicians, technicians, and engineers leaving in droves through the open border. Kennedy responds by calling in 148,000 reserves to potentially defend Berlin. In October, after a few incidents where army vehicles are not allowed to cross the border, Kennedy's special envoy to Berlin, retired General Lucius Clay, decides to test the borders to see that U.S. Army vehicles still have, in fact, free passage over that border. The test vehicle passes through. However, to be safe, the Americans backed up the test by parking a few tanks on their side of the border. The USSR also parked tanks on its own side. When the Americans see that everything is normal, they call their tanks back. But the Soviets misunderstand this move and think that they're only retreating because of them. So they roll into Friedrichstrasse towards Checkpoint Charlie, the main American Army border crossing. The American tanks quickly turn around and take up aggressive positions on their side of the border. So there they stand, fewer than 80 meters apart, for the next 48 hours.
Standoff. Big standoff.
As Kennedy and Khrushchev negotiate who will pull back first. In the end, they agree the Soviets should pull back 5 meters first, then the Americans, and so on in steps. Although somewhat comical in nature, the incident has serious implications as both sides walk away with the impression that the other side is ready to go to war over Berlin. Both Khrushchev and JFK are actually recorded at the time saying they don't care that much for the fate of Berlin, despite making public statements to the contrary. That does not really matter though, as the allies of both countries care very much about Berlin, so the USSR and the US are left with little choice. Meanwhile, the pressure on Khrushchev to do something about the overwhelming US nuclear superiority is mounting. By May 1962, he has a plan. He asks Fidel Castro to allow him to do the same thing the US did in Turkey and Italy. Put a few MRBMs in their front yard. Castro reluctantly agrees, and the construction of missile sites begins. Despite all of this, during the summer of 1962, Kennedy is still under attack for being too soft on communism and the Soviet Union. So at the White House press conferences on September 4th and September 13th, he publicly warns Cuba and the USSR that the United States will not tolerate any nuclear buildup on Cuba and will take forceful actions to prevent it. He will go on record as regretting this warning when, on October 16, 1962, American spy planes discover the missile sites and the 13 most dangerous days in human history begin. Not kidding about that. The 13 most dangerous days in our history. If you'd like to see some other dark days when the future was being decided, you can click right here for our video on the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact just before World War II broke out. It is the Time Ghost Army that in these dark times in 2020 finances our programming, so please join us.
But yeah, I mean, this is fire, man. Shout out to Time Ghost History, bro. This is fire. I like this. I mean, this is fire. You know what I'm saying? I like the presentation. You know what I'm saying? It's quick to the point, and he explains very well. But yeah, we're definitely going to continue this journey. You know what I'm saying? Definitely want to look at Cuban Missile Crisis, Cold War, more in depth into the Cold War, not just oversimplified, but more in depth. Watergate, any of these, like Auschwitz. Like, I want to look into that type stuff. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, thank you again for watching. If you watch the entire video, you are a GOAT. I appreciate everyone. Like everyone that comments and likes and shares and reposts and does everything, tells your grandma, your granddad, your friends. Thank you so much for supporting, not just for supporting me and just supporting just this channel. You know what I'm saying? Thank you so much. I appreciate everybody. Again, if you didn't like the video, we throwing hands. Again, we still throwing hands. This is a reminder. Meet me outside if you don't like the video. Meet me outside. If you don't hit that like button, we can fight. Sorry, that was playing. But hit that like button though. Hit that subscribe button if you're new to the channel. Again, all shout outs to Time Goes History. This is not in a way an attempt to steal content. I'm not stealing content. I'm literally adding on to what they have. I'm not stealing it. Stealing it would be reposting an entire video, would be downloading that video and just putting it on my channel. That's stealing content. That's straight plagiarism. But anyway, thank you so much. Have a great day. Please be safe. Stay on the grind. I'll see you real soon, man. I'm out. Peace.